What's happening, guys? Sam Adams here, and welcome to a brand new episode of Caffeinate today for June the 27th of 2019. Of course, if you are brand new to the show, welcome on in, and this is a daily gaming news podcast hosted 5 days a week, Monday through Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, live on twitch.tv/Samuel Adams, bringing you the hottest gaming news from around the industry and packing it up in one tight, neat show for you to enjoy during your day, whether live or on the VOD version uploaded to youtube.com/Samuel Adams Media, or even on podcast services around the world. Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, whatever you might use for your podcast, it is probably on there. But today, the topics do include the human cost of Call of Duty Black Ops 4. That is our headline story of the day. Jason Schreier has put out a brand new story talking about crunch at Treyarch, amongst many other unfair working conditions that I think we should definitely talk about, because I must admit, this is one of the best reads that I have read so far in 2019. Then we talk about Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft issuing a joint letter discouraging the Trump administration from new tariffs towards China. Sledgehammer co-founder Glen Schofield has joined PUBG Corp and is the leader of a brand new studio that is going to be taking PUBG in a new direction. Not the base game, but rather something that is focusing on a narrative-driven experience for players. Blizzard co-founder Mike Morhaime is officially able to talk about Blizzard, and he could be coming back to games, but there is a lot to break down with the story behind Mike. Then Candy Crush developer says they have 9.2 million players, consisting of 3.4% of their player base, that spend at least 3 hours one day. That's literally 3 hours a day on Candy Crush. Twitch has launched a brand new subscriber-only streaming feature. Then we'll talk more about Dr. Disrespect being back on Twitch after a 2-week ban after streaming in a bathroom at E3. And finally, PlayStation Plus games for July have been announced, and we will break that down for you to keep you guys up to date and informed on everything happening in the gaming industry, at least of June 27th of 2019. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into today's top stories, shall we? We have the beginning of the show with the human cost of Call of Duty Black Ops 4. One Friday afternoon a few weeks ago, the developers at Treyarch held a happy hour event to welcome the summer interns. There was pizza, beer, and jubilation for everyone at the studio behind Call of Duty Black Ops 4, except the quality assurance testers who had to leave shortly after they got there. That is the intro of Jason Schreier's big piece over at Kotaku, and I'm going to be reading some excerpts, but the entire story is worth reading. I would highly recommend checking it out. If you are watching the YouTube version of the show, it is linked down below. But let's hit the highlights. QA was told we were only allowed down at the party for a max of 20 minutes, and we really shouldn't drink anything because we still had to work, said one tester. It sucks, but honestly, we are pretty used to getting these sort of rules whenever they do have any parties here. It was a small affront, but it felt indicative of the bigger problem. At Treyarch, many contract employees, especially the testers, say they feel like second-class citizens. Testers work on the second floor of the office, while most of the other developers are on the first. Some testers say they are told not to speak to developers in any other departments, and one told Jason they'll only do so surreptitiously out of fear of getting fired. When they get to work, testers have to park their cars in a different parking lot as compared to other employees, one that's further away from the office. When lunch is catered, testers are told that the food downstairs is for the development team, not for them. Sometimes they are allowed to scrounge for leftovers an hour later, once the non-testing staff have gotten to eat. Put another way, when I asked a non-tester, Schreier says, at Treyarch about the party, they responded that they were surprised that they were invited at all. Now, this was a big story, and of course you can go on to read more about it, but essentially the story outlines this sense of disparity between contract employees especially, and specifically testers, as compared to the main developers of Call of Duty Black Ops 4. And there is a sense of a division that is being created on a corporate level, so much to the point that whenever somebody makes friends with a mainline developer, like if a tester were to befriend somebody that is actually working on development development of the game. You have a secrecy brought in where they can't really talk to the other friend in public because of fear of them getting fired for being a distraction to the overall workflow. Now, the article also breaks down the amount of crunch that went into Black Ops 4 before it was released, because the game had a full campaign that was somewhat of an experimental campaign before it actually had Blackout. Speaking of Blackout, that development only began in February of 2018 when the game was set to come out in October of 2018. Let that one sink in. That is a lot of crunch for a very small amount of time, and on top of that, there is talk about lower holiday pay, sometimes no holiday bonus at all. There is talk about a cap on what can actually be charged as far as hours go, the expectation of working past what is required without any kind of additional compensation, or at the very least, the assumption that you are going to be there regardless of anything else that is happening. You are going to be at the workplace until you finish the project, even if it does require you to take on potentially over 60 hours a week in some cases, which again is not necessarily something that is horrendous to a lot of people. Like myself, I don't mind working incredible amounts of overtime just because, quite frankly, I get paid for it, and that's perfectly fine. But at the same time, it's a situation in which not everybody is as comfortable with that amount of work as some other people, and so you have to take this into consideration. But make no mistake, there is completely and totally fair compensation, but when it comes to holiday bonuses, this report says that sometimes those don't come through. When it comes to the amount of money people are getting paid, it is incredibly low as compared to the amount of skill that some employees are bringing to the table. In fact, some say that after years and years of work in the gaming industry, they might only be getting $20 an hour, which, make no mistake, is not exactly going to be fair in the majority of cases. But with that being said, the entire article is totally worth reading. It's a pretty long read from Jason Schreier, but again, something that is incredibly important. And so the human cost of Call of Duty Black Ops 4 is essentially a combination of unfair payment, of unfair work policies, of unfair treatment of employees, of division within the company that is completely and totally fabricated by the corporate level. That is something that should be addressed, and Treyarch has actually responded after this article came out via an internal email, which has been added to the end of the story itself. And they say, and I quote, "Team, today Kotaku published a story that explores a number of reported behind-the-scenes issues in Black Ops 4 development. The first and most important statement that we want to make to the team is that as managers of this studio, we take the well-being of every single individual working here very seriously. We have a vision for the future of this studio that includes significant improvements to work-life balance, and we plan to achieve that through better project planning, streamlined production processes, and rigorous decision-making timelines. This is also our intention to maintain our commitment to increased transparency. Getting there will require time, hard work, and commitment. Most of all, it will require open communication. If you ever feel like your needs aren't being met, please do not hesitate to communicate actively with your manager. No one should ever feel like they don't have options, can't talk openly, or that the only choice is to take their concerns to the public. These conversations should always start with an honest dialogue with your department manager, and if that's not working, feel free to reach out to one of us. Game development is a wildly complex art, and it requires a diverse set of people and skills to do it successfully. It is important for all of us to foster a studio culture that treats all team members with respect. We appreciate the contributions made by all parts of the team in the name of the games we make. Sincerely, Dan and Mark," and of course those are the studio heads at Treyarch. And so that is a comforting email, something that reinforces the idea that maybe some change is coming, especially after this kind of report does come out. And of course, I understand where they're coming from with this email, because it does seem like there is a general fear from a lot of people within the gaming industry to go to a manager that is above them and to complain, or at least to make it known that there is this disparity between employees, to make it known that they aren't satisfied, that the work-life balance and the unfair policies aren't exactly vibing with them. There is a general fear and a hostility and an anxiety around actually making these fears known. And I think that's something that is completely and totally understandable, because, again, as we've been talking about these stories as they've rolled out over the previous few months, you do have this idea of the gaming industry being full of fresh college graduates trying to make a name for themselves. You have these content creators and these people that are pushing the gaming industry, and more people are wanting to jump on board. And so whenever you have this giant influx of people that have an interest in becoming a part of the industry, there is a high turnover rate, because if one person isn't satisfied, there are 20,000 other people that are ready and waiting to become that one game tester, that one person that is underpaid and overworked, that is simply happy to be in the gaming. And it's a gross situation, because there's a high potential for people to be taken advantage of. That's what gets me about this entire situation. But hopefully these reports are making a difference. Again, after he actually put out this story, Jason Schreier tweeted and said he was appalled and shocked at the fact that so many people, after this story had come out, have come out and complained in a similar kind of fashion about similar practices in their own workplace. It's crazy how much of this happens in the gaming industry, but I would also say that this is not something that is only in the gaming industry. Of course, crunch happens in many other places, maybe not to this specific level, but the fact that the gaming industry is so young, the fact that it is a young portion of the entertainment industry, leads me to believe that maybe there is even less regulation, less of a sense of what to expect whenever it comes to employee treatment, when it comes to what employees expect from developers and from the projects that they are working on. People don't really, it's still a very gray area, so to speak. And so it's going to be a while before we see any kind of regulation that is similar to what we see in other industries. But without a doubt, these stories are important. The reports that are coming out are incredibly important, because they let people know what is happening on the inside. And some people might not like that, but at the end of the day, it needs to be made known, and people need to know exactly what is happening behind the scenes. However, again, I'm sure many of the corporate heads and the people on the boards would definitely recommend employees going to their managers. And again, that's something you can try, but at the end of the day, it still is a gamble in the current state of things. However, let's move on to the next topic of the day. Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft issue a joint letter discouraging the Trump administration from new tariffs. I promise after this, the topics get a little bit less heavy, because these are some big heavy hitters coming out of the gate. Earlier this month, U.S. President Donald Trump announced plans to escalate an ongoing trade war with China by increasing tariffs on imports to 25%. This move is designed to force China to renegotiate their trade deals with regard to their exports into the country, but businesses who would be feeling the brunt of this tax are sounding off against the proposed expansion of plans. This list now includes video game hardware manufacturers, as Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft have drafted and signed a letter asking the administration to reconsider and warning them of the consumer downside. The letter, which totals 7 pages, is written by the general counsel for each of the 3 companies and is addressed to Joseph Barloon, general counsel to the Office of the United States Trade Representative. The letter makes several points, but the biggest takeaway is that the companies are asking for an exception to the tariffs based on how ruinous it would be for console sales. While we appreciate the administration's efforts to protect U.S. intellectual property and preserve U.S. high-tech leadership, the disproportionate harm caused by these tariffs to U.S. consumers and businesses will undermine, not advance, these goals, the letter reads. Accordingly, we respectfully request that the administration remove HTSUS subheading 9504.50.00 covering video game consoles from the final list of tariffs, and thus refrain from applying tariffs on these products. One of the points made in the letter is that beyond harming companies that manufacture parts or entire consoles in Japan, this would also affect the American development industry quite a bit. The idea is that the expanded tariffs would mean console manufacturers would no longer be eating the cost for MSRP and would have to significantly raise the prices on consoles to make manufacturing them worth selling, thus limiting the amount of consoles that could be sold and thus further limiting the number of people willing to buy games. As Microsoft and Sony have already announced their successor consoles, the two companies are likely uneasy trying to figure out whether manufacturing in China will continue to be economically viable, as it is usually significantly cheaper, more efficient, and has the required expertise for console hardware. Rumors are also swirling that Nintendo is hastily moving manufacturing around to minimize their tariffs for an also rumored new Switch model later this year. If the Trump administration chooses to go forward with the tariffs, it will likely decide how newer consoles are priced when the Scarlet and PlayStation 5 inevitably get detailed sometime within the next year. And so, that is where the situation sits as of June 26th at 1:40 p.m. over there on Game Informer. But very interesting, again, as we've been talking about over the past few days, to see politics and gaming becoming blended, specifically in this situation with the new tariffs, because whenever there is money on the line, it seems like a lot of companies begin to get a little bit up and at 'em when it comes to actually becoming activists in the political world. And so now that's exactly what we have here from Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft. It seems like the only thing that has been able to fully break down the barriers that have outlined the console wars for the better part of the past 20 years is the fact that now money is on the line and they say, hey, our consoles are going to be really expensive and no one's going to be able to buy them. That's what it took to get them off. I'm just kidding. But when it comes down to it, this is a probably wise decision for them to make. Will it make a difference? Likely not. It doesn't seem like the current administration has much of a pity party, so to speak. It doesn't really pull any punches when it comes to how they address tariffs, when it comes to how they address people complaining about things. It just seems to be very a boisterous administration currently in the United States. So, will they end up actually making a difference and saving console prices from future tariffs with China? Likely not. And of course, this is a very specifically detrimental time for tariffs to be coming into play when it comes to console production, because you do have this build up to the next generation. And again, let's say that console supplying, the production of consoles begins within the next 3 months. During this entire console production cycle, you could see these tariffs in place, and then they could be removed within a year or so. And so whenever you have that kind of potential scenario, this is possibly the worst time for tariffs to come into play for people that are trying to make consoles, which currently include the 3 big guys, Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony. So to see this letter is not shocking, but it is something that I think they're trying to deeply avoid when it comes to the tariffs, because again, the cost is passed on to the consumers, and when the cost is passed on to consumers, they may or may not buy. I mean, really, the reports coming out from a lot of developers that have the dev kits for the next generation of PlayStation and Xbox, as they do tend to roll out, are saying that they aren't nearly as exciting as the PS4 and the Xbox One were whenever they came out back a few years ago. And so whenever you have that kind of statement being made, more people are more likely to hang on to their hardware longer and wait for any kind of price drop, wait for the tariffs to be eased up a bit so that maybe console prices can drop some more. That is a much higher likelihood as compared to how it was whenever the PS4 and the Xbox One launched. But again, I suppose we will have to wait and see until fall/winter of 2020 when Project Scarlet officially launches to see exactly how this is impacting the overall console sales. And again, you can follow tons of people on Twitter that are incredible sources of info for that kind of information. My personal favorite, Benji Sales, will definitely be breaking that kind of thing down. That is at Benji_sales, if I remember correctly. But without a doubt, interesting time to be in the console production cycle. However, those are our big political, social stories of the day. Let's move on to talk about gaming things, because Sledgehammer co-founder Glen Schofield has joined PUBG Corp. Schofield's new Striking Distance studio will develop an original narrative in the PUBG universe. Glen Schofield, well known among shooter fans as the former head of EA's Visceral Games studio and the co-founder of Sledgehammer Games, parted ways with Activision at the end of 2018, not quite a year after stepping down from his position as Sledgehammer's game director and chief creative officer. Today, he revealed his next big thing. He has joined PUBG Corporation to head up a new AAA development studio called Striking Distance. In a video announcing the studio, Schofield ran down the highlights of the last decade of his career, which includes the development of Dead Space and 3 Call of Duty games, Modern Warfare 3, Advanced Warfare, and World War II. But now, I'm looking to take those experiences and explore new designs and concepts, he said. As a creative, the freedom to explore the PUBG universe has me excited about the possibilities, which we view as beyond Battle Royale. Schofield said the studio will develop an original narrative in the PUBG universe, clarifying that it will not be a sequel to PUBG, which is really no surprise, because you don't hire a high-profile guy like Schofield to tweak up your next BR map. You do it because you want to build, as he stated, a big, loud, single-player game. The storytelling looks to be in a goofy BR like PUBG, but it may not be immediately apparent. But if Schofield's in, I wouldn't rush to bet against it. Striking Distance does not appear to have a website yet, but of course you can find the hiring page at careers.pubg.com if you did want to jump on board, because I have heard from, I believe, Robert Bowling on Twitter that they have over 50 people they are hiring right now. So if you do want to dive in and get in the gaming industry, a pretty good company to work for, a big startup with a big name heading up the big company. The movie Big with Tom Hanks is very good. But exciting to see the narrative come into PUBG, because I think there is potential to have one there. The big question is, how will they insert the narrative? Of course, it's a wise move to make a new studio that is going to be developing a new game that is completely and totally focused on narrative, because to bring any kind of narrative experience into PUBG is getting away from what PUBG is. In fact, I would say that the reason that I love PUBG so much, and I've put over, I think, 130 hours or so into the game over the past few years, the reason I love it so much is because it is the most generic video game that you could ever imagine. It's like if you're watching some kind of cartoon and they have General Shooting Game 1. You know, whatever it might be, that is what PUBG is. It works well, but there is no depth to it. You find guns, you shoot people. It's got this giant map that looks relatively run-of-the-mill when it really comes down to it, if we're talking about most of the maps in the game. But it's fun. It's good fun. I enjoy PUBG, and I'm not dogging it out whatsoever. It is good at what it does. And to see a narrative come into play definitely is interesting, but will it work out? That's the big question that is still left on the table. But of course, Modern Warfare 3, a game that I put well over 250 hours into, so I'm incredibly excited to see what comes down the pipe from Glen Schofield and his team behind the scenes at striking distance. But if you were excited about the future of PUBG, we now have a general outline of what that could actually look like. However, let's move on to what Mike Morhaime is working on, because the Blizzard co-founder is no longer under a non-compete and could be coming back to games. VG247 is at a Game Lab, an industry event in Barcelona, where Blizzard co-founder Mike Morhaime today accepted the 2019 Honor Award. Morhaime stepped down as Blizzard president in October 2018, did a short stint as an advisory role, and then left the company he founded shortly after. He has since been enjoying retirement. We got the chance to talk to Morhaime during a roundtable interview, they say at VG247, during which we asked about his non-compete contract with Blizzard. It appears he may be coming back to the games industry sooner than you might have thought, since his non-compete clause ended in April this year. I'm allowed to do anything now, Morhaime said. The fact is, right now we are still in the brainstorming phase. We are exploring a bunch of different ideas. I don't really have anything that I'm ready to talk about. We followed up by asking if he planned to stay in games, and he says some of our ideas are in games and some of them are not. But of course, Morhaime stepped down to spend more time with his family, to enjoy retirement, because again, he was one of the first 3 employees at Blizzard, if I remember correctly, one of the big boys that really saw the studio grow from this small indie development to something that is one of the biggest development studios on the planet, of course, pumping out games like World of Warcraft, now WoW Classic, you've got Diablo, Overwatch, StarCraft, so many big games that have been released over the past few years. And I will say, there are so many good articles about what's happening right now at Game Lab, specifically in regards to Mike Morhaime, because you see him talking about what happened with Diablo Immortal. Whenever the reveal came at BlizzCon last year, you see him talking about stuff like why Blizzard cans 50% of the games that they have on the table. There are so many interesting articles out there right now that I could not recommend enough if you do want to check out what is going on behind the scenes at Blizzard, because it does give a pretty deep dive into it overall. But again, to see Mike Morhaime come back to games is something that would be interesting, because whenever you have somebody who is as big of an icon as Mike Morhaime getting involved in something new, there is obviously a ton of talent, a ton of creativity, a ton of history, a ton of experience there that a brand new idea could very well take advantage of, and it could be the next big thing. I suppose we will have to wait and see exactly what he does come up with, but at the end of the day, it's cool to see nonetheless. The number 1, Mike Morhaime, happy in retirement. Number 2, could be coming back to games, or at least having some kind of adventure in and of itself. However, let's talk about Candy Crush, the game your mom plays. At least my mom plays. Candy Crush developer says 9.2 million users play at least 3 hours a day, but it's totally not addictive. Oh no, of course not. Alex Dale, a senior executive at Candy Crush Saga developer King, told a UK House of Commons Select Committee that approximately 3.4% or 9.2 million users spend 3 or more hours a day playing the game, and that one player spent an astonishing $2,600 on microtransactions within the app in a 24-hour period last year, but steadfastly denied that some people are addicted to it, according to The Guardian. That 9.2 million is out of Sega's, wow, that was Sorry, my bad. That 9.2 million is out of Candy Crush Saga's staggering player base of 270 million, but to put in another context, it is a bigger number than the number of people living in each but the top 10 states by population size. 2017 census numbers. Dale thinks this is all well and good and these people are happy doing what they're doing according to The Guardian. Among 270 million players, we have between 2 and 3 contacts each month from people concerned about having spent too much money or time on the game. Dale told members of the Digital Culture, Media, and Sports Committee, it is a very, very small number of people who spend or play at high levels. When we speak with them, they say they are happy with what they're doing. He added that many of these people may be older or currently in circumstances which preclude many other uses of their time, The Guardian wrote. Dale said of the 270 million players, 3.4%, 9.2 million play for 3 or more hours a day, while 0.16%, 432,000 play for 6 or more. He said the average player, the core market is women aged 35 and over, plays for 38 minutes a day. Defending the numbers, Dale pointed out that many players were from the demographics that had plenty of time on their hands, including older people and those convalescing. Dale also told MPs the player who spent $2,600 on Candy Crush microtransactions in one day was making a rational decision because there was a sale on at the time and the player used them over a 7-month period. Pause. I'm shocked at how much they're tracking this data. Don't focus on one specific person. I mean, I understand why, because you're sitting here like, damn, we just made $2,600. Let's see what this person do. But at the same time, kind of weird, to see them focusing specifically on this big whale of a consumer when it comes down to it. But moving on. According to The Guardian, Dale responded to MP inquiries as to whether it planned on operating differently after the WHO recognized gaming disorder last year. Not the band, the World Health Organization. A contentious decision that attracted no shortage of dissenting opinion in the medical community by saying King would look at the whole area again, but we have done it before and players didn't like it. Of course, Candy Crush Saga is an incredibly lucrative business, making tons of money, over $1.5 billion in revenue from the series in 2018, according to Variety. Players spend approximately $4.2 million a day on average through the 2 major apps stores, Google Play and iOS Apple Store. But if you did want to dive in and check out what's happening with Candy Crush Saga, would not recommend it. It's a pretty stereotypical match 3 game with a couple of bells and whistles here and there, but really, the big story here is that 9.2 million users play at least 3 hours a day. That is a lot of time. I mean, if you do the math, that's over 27.6 million hours per day. Let that sink in. That's a lot of time. Do you know what you could be doing with that time? You could be playing Candy Crush, or maybe doing something more productive, going to the gym, maybe building a business, perhaps just, I don't know, being outside. But again, I think there is a point to be made here that Dale is correct in saying that many of the people playing Candy Crush have the time on their hands, but that doesn't mean they should be taken advantage of. I mean, clearly there's a problem whenever somebody is spending $2,600 in a 24-hour period on a game. That's ridiculous and kind of blows my mind. But at the same time, again, money to be made, so I understand the corporate side of it, I understand the human side of it, but without a doubt, Candy Crush is one of those games that just keeps on going. I mean, specifically the main app, Candy Crush Saga. There have been spin-offs, but there is none that is as successful as the main Candy Crush, and again, that is just an insane figure to me, that the top 3.4%, 9.2 million people, those two figures, that 9.2 million is 3.4% of the entire population of the gaming sphere when it comes to Candy Crush Saga, spends over 3 hours a day on the game. However, let's move on to talk about some Twitch culture, shall we? Twitch launches subscriber-only streaming feature. On Twitch, fans can subscribe to their favorite streamers, typically for $4.99 per month. Of course, there are tiers if you do want to go up, and of course, you do have Twitch Prime, and if you've got Twitch Prime, you've got a free sub to give to a streamer every single month. But usually that comes with minor perks like subscriber-only emotes, subscriber badges, and access to sub-only chat, if streamers decide to enable it. But now, streamers are getting a big addition to their arsenals, subscriber-only streams. Previously, no matter how many subs a streamer accrued, streams were available to everybody. However, today, Twitch is soft launching a subscriber stream. If a viewer subs to a channel at any tier, including a Twitch Prime subscription, they will have access to that creator's subscriber streams, the company wrote in a blog post. If they are not a subscriber and they arrive on the channel that's running a sub stream, they will see a preview of what's going on, and if they like it, they will be able to join the party immediately by subscribing. The goal, says Twitch, is for streamers to make more money. I'm sorry, to be able to reward superfans, meaning subscribers, VIPs, and moderators as they see fit. We could definitely see competitive streamers taking requests on heroes or champions to play, tabletop streamers running a weekly campaign for subs, music streamers making all request set list, and a whole lot more, wrote Twitch. This feature is now in beta, and streamers can use it if they are affiliates or partners and haven't violated Twitch community guidelines in the past 90 days. So basically, don't expect Dr. Disrespect's impending return stream to be sub-only. However, this policy apparently also includes instances of audio being removed from videos because of copyrighted music, something that happens to streamers on the regular, and sometimes because a game was playing a randomly included and offending track. Quite a few people are also reporting that they've been barred from using the feature with no clear explanation of the guidelines that they actually violated. Now, of course, they intend to keep sub-only streams safe via the aforementioned preview functionality, which means those streams are not private, and streamers won't be so shielded from the public eye that they can get away with blatantly ignoring the terms of service, or at least that is the hope. So reactions to this have been relatively mixed, and I'll just go ahead and go off and say right now that they have in fact been mixed. A lot of people are saying this is a very cool tool for streamers to be able to use because essentially instead of using a third-party site like Patreon, you can just keep everything on Twitch, and that is the overall goal of any kind of new feature on any kind of website, to be able to keep people on your place, to keep people on your domain for as long as possible is the overall goal, because the more time they spend there, the higher your traffic, and the higher your traffic, the higher the likelihood will be that somebody will spend money on your site via subs, bits, whatever it might be, buying some merch. If they become really affiliated with Twitch, whatever it might be, they will spend money there. That's the overall goal. Now, when it comes to other people that are in the dissenting option here, they say that it pretty much divides communities in a way. You have the subs and then you have the plebs, but that's been something that's been on Twitch for a while. However, at the same time, it hasn't necessarily been as restricting to the point that you literally can't watch a stream. That's pretty much where people seem to have drawn the line. Where do I sit? I'm kind of in the middle right now because, again, I understand the dissatisfaction of not being able to watch a stream, but if used appropriately, this could be a big tool, because I'm not a fan of any kind of streamer saying, hey, we are doing a sub-only week, a sub-only month. This is a sub-only stream. That's not going to work because you have to have people that are there to begin with before you turn on People need to subscribe before you have subscriber-only streams. If they use this tool as something of a perk, for instance, for subscribers, like if you do stream Monday through Friday for 3 hours a day at night, you could start doing 1 or 2, maybe 3 morning streams for subscribers to add an additional benefit to subscribing to the stream. Essentially, it adds a bit of a new carrot to dangle in front of the person who is trying to support the streamer. But that's just my 2 cents on that. Again, a ton of people are up in arms against this, but in its defense, it is normally the situation, especially when new features are rolled out on YouTube, on Twitch, on Mixer, whatever it might be, that people become very offended by the smallest little things, even if they aren't necessarily bad, or at least not that bad. And so, will this stick around? It could stick around. Again, as I said on Twitter, the general understanding is that if a feature is good, then it will rise to the top. If a feature isn't used, if the community doesn't like a feature, whatever it might be, then it will fall to the bottom, and eventually it will either sit idle or it will be removed entirely. We've seen this time and time again on a variety of sites over the years. And so, depending on how this is received, it could very well become a big part of the mainstay of Twitch, or it could fall to the wayside like so many other features have. But I will say, to hear reports that the music restrictions, the licensing restrictions that do mute videos on Twitch, if that is an offending, offense, I suppose is the worst way I could possibly put it, but if that goes against the guidelines for how you get sub-only streams, I can't imagine that too many people are going to have access to this. I mean, I keep my music so low that it really doesn't ever catch on the, identification, whatever it might be. But at the same time, many people play main music at very loud volumes. Some sub alerts are actually like AC/DC riffs and stuff like that. You have these instances where that will obviously not work. And so, again, I don't know how many people are going to have access to this, but Twitch has launched a sub-only streaming feature. However, as we said, Dr. Disrespect will not be using it because he is back on Twitch, but apparently not going to be able to use. It's not going to work like that. Just 2 weeks after his channel was suspended for ill-advised shenanigans at E3, Guy Bomb, aka Dr. Disrespect, the mustache that yells like a streamer, is back on Twitch. Dr. Disrespect's channel was darkened and his E3 credentials revoked after he live-streamed from a public washroom at the convention. They say at PC Gamer, like a whole bunch of Brits. He's in the washroom streaming on the telly. He's streaming to the crumpets out there in the world. Twitch's terms of service doesn't have a specific rule against streaming from the cam, but it does forbid anything that is invasive of privacy, which I think would probably encompass toilets. Furthermore, the state of California, where E3 is held, does have a law explicitly forbidding the use of cameras in bathrooms, which the live stream clearly violated. The suspension falls far short of the maximum 30-day suspension that Twitch imposes for most violations of its terms, and his return was unexpectedly quiet. He said nothing on social media, but did retweet a couple of reports about it. Nonetheless, the news spread quickly via word of mouth to the point that, as reported by Dextero, his channel's chat had to be put in subscriber-only mode to limit the number of messages being sent, even though he was not actually streaming. It is not known what conditions were attached to the reactivation of Dr. Disrespect's channel after the relatively short suspension, and Twitch declined to comment further. Now, I will say that whenever a big streamer gets banned, it tends to be a 2-week ban, because I would go ahead and wager, I would say it's a safe bet, that whenever Dr. Disrespect was banned from Twitch, their revenue dropped. I guarantee you can see on a graph the day that it happened. That's just how it is. And so to have a 2-week ban is something that shows punishment, but is it just punishment? Is it fair? In other words, again, that's up for debate. The jury can decide. I have heard reports that he is likely going to have to go to court at some point over this because, again, illegal in the state of California, so there's probably some kind of offense here that has to be handled. But hey, he'll probably just take your sub money and buy a lawyer and never have to deal with it again. However, Dr. Disrespect is back on Twitch, so for those that missed the Mustached Mayhem, he should be back at some point over the next few days, hopefully soon, because, again, I know his chat is ravenous for some more of that Mustached Mayhem. But this entire situation has really shown a light on the fact that Twitch has no way to enforce restrictions. Twitch has no way to punish streamers that break the law, that break their TOS, whatever you want to call it. Twitch has little to no control over what their people do. That's sad. That's pathetic, really, when it comes down to it. They should have stronger tools that whenever they do need to enforce a rule, whenever they do need to punish somebody, it actually is effective. But again, it's one of those situations where if somebody isn't streaming on Twitch, they can do a stream on YouTube, as we saw with the, I believe, 13-year-old Fortnite player that just started streaming back up on YouTube before coming back to Twitch eventually. It's a weird situation right now because, again, there are so many alternatives. There are so many ways to contact an audience that, I mean, even if you just live streamed via Instagram, or if you make a YouTube video, as Dr. Disrespect did, instead of streaming on Twitch from E3, then there's really no way to punish someone, and that's a very dangerous way to go about it. But enough talk of that. I have free games for you, especially if you are a PlayStation fan, because July's PlayStation Plus free games have been revealed and include Pro Evolution Soccer 2019. So July is going to be a sporty month for PlayStation Plus subscribers. First up on the list is PES Productions' Pro Evolution Soccer 2019, last year's simulation soccer from Konami. The PES series is the only true competitor to FIFA franchise, although it is missing some of the sport's top 5 clubs and leagues because EA can shell out for their expensive exclusive licenses. PES remains renowned for its soccer gameplay, however. It just so happens that PES 2019 will go free on PlayStation Plus a few days before the 2019 Women's World Cup final, although there is no World Cup content in the game because EA Sports holds the license for FIFA, which runs the World Cup. The other free game for July is Horizon Chase Turbo, an arcade racing title from Brazilian indie developer Aquarius Game Studio. The company originally released the game as Horizon Chase World Tour on mobile devices in 2015 and brought it to Switch, PS4, PC, and Xbox One as Turbo in 2018. The port contains cars, tracks, and modes that were not available in the mobile version. And so if you did want to check out both of these games, you can get them on Tuesday, July the 2nd, but in the meantime, you still have access to Sonic Mania and Borderlands The Handsome Collection, a much better lineup for June 2019 when it comes to PlayStation Plus. Specifically, the Handsome Collection, if you do want to pick that up, I would highly recommend it because, again, Borderlands 3 coming out in September, and you can get caught up with the main bulk of the content. But for soccer fans, for football fans, you can dive in and check out Pro Evolution Soccer 2019 as the big headliner. And if you don't like that, well, you've got a mobile game that's coming out on PlayStation Plus, which sounds very unappealing. I have no desire to play, number one, the mobile game, number two, either of these games, because, hey, sorry, not really my cup of tea. However, with that being said, that rounds out today's episode of Caffeinate. Of course, if you are brand new to the show, thank you for making it all the way to the end. I appreciate you, and I hope you do enjoy the show itself. But subscribe if you aren't already. Follow on all of the social media channels. Do all of the things. And I will see you guys tomorrow on a brand new episode of Caffeinate. But until then, have a fantastic one. Peace.